15 A short story about Ruslan. In 1987 I and my brother learned what a thimbles game was, a street illegal gambling that was just gaining wide popularity that days. Many still remember it, I guess. It was a simple game, all you had to do was to guess a ball inside one of the three thimbles, betting your money on it, normally 50 or 100 rubles a bet. You guess it right and money is yours, as much you had just bet with. If you bet with your 50 and you win, you get 100. Simple. They will show you the ball under which of the thimbles it was first, then they would move and shuffle the thimbles around and give you a chance to guess where the ball was now and get the money. The ball was made of PU foam, so it was very easy to hide it anywhere. The deal was to get the people involved, to let them win a bit first. Well, then they take the bait and you know what happens. You know Ruslan but not his younger brother yet. We all have similar names, identical last names and initials, so I don't want to get you confused, so I will call them respectively junior and senior since their age difference was 7 years, even though the junior was a head taller of his older brother. So, several months had passed after that fabulous holidays of ours. Well, sort of, for me anyway. And senior managed to keep all his money untouched, and in a few months he had increased his saving to some respectable 700 rubles. It was about almost $1,000 according to an official exchange rate, incredibly big money for a country with an average 120 rubles salary per capita. None of us had ever had that much money before. I remember him once lovingly laying all his available cash on a couch and taking pictures. I took a bit different way to solve my financial problem. I was going to go to Siberia where the real money was instead, just like North Dakota in the mid-2010s, so I quit my job at the garage and had my payment already. Only a few days left for me to go. Yes, it was only a few days left for me to go when an idea came to Senior's head. The idea was that he could finally buy a decent, if not the most expensive, Japanese tape recorder. With that, the three of us went to Pyatigorsk to check komissionkas, the Soviet-era pawning shops I wrote here before, the only loopholes on a Soviet-established North Korean or Cuban-style rationing trading system where you could legally get scarce imported goods at insanely expensive prices, to check for a suitable recorder. We walked through all such shops and marketplaces in Pyatigorsk. The recorders for the price he could afford were not good enough to him. So we went to a Sentuki, checked all the komissionkas there, which generally were better, but still the senior wanted more. We went all the way to Kislovodsk where we were eyeing one, almost bought it, and still he couldn't make his mind up to it. All the while we jumped from town to town. It wasn't that hard with the local commuter train in that densely populated area. The junior kept telling us about that thimble gambling thing he saw at the Mineral Waters airport. He watched the gamblers and always guessed right. And how he wished he had some money to bet, he knew he would win there. Okay, we said, someday maybe we would go there to take a look at that thimbles thing. The idea started growing. The available tape recorders still weren't good enough even in Kislovodsk, and the junior now directly proposed to go to Mineral Waters and take a chance to gamble. If we win, and he knew we would, then we would be able to buy a real double-decker, something like a Sharp 700 or something. Wow! He got it? The idea was instilled in our heads. M. Waters was the opposite end of the local Kislovodsk Mineral Waters suburban train line, about an hour to get there. Off we went. Sure enough, at the airport landside, we found a lively group of people huddling around a handsome thimble rigger dressed up in a trendy Adidas tracksuit, ballying for potential gamblers with typical Chechen accent. Good eye is your good prize. Rejoice if you win. Don't feel bad if you lose, no kids no women are allowed, and something like that, but sounded better and more poetic in Russian. We joined the crowd to watch. It was amazing to see the gambling people so stupid to keep pointing at the wrong thimbles with no balls in it. It was so easy. I always guessed right. So did my cousins. And there was an observer with a backpack sitting close to the thimble dealer in a circle and found a moment to quickly lift a thimble up and put back down it again. The ball was in there, and right then the several gamblers pointed to it. The first one just made 100 rubles. Easy money. If it had been staged, it looked so natural. So we watched the others playing and kept guessing the ball right. And then when the thimbles were shuffled again, the senior all of a sudden stepped on one of them and handed out his 100 rubles. I wasn't 100% sure the ball was in it. I lost track of a thimble. To tell the truth, I wasn't going to bet. But, what the hell? I didn't want to miss that chance to win either. He is going to take it? Hey! Said I am in too. I feverishly counted my 100 rubles by 10 rubles bills. I think I gave extra 10, well, fuck it, I was going to get them back anyway. The ball was under another thimble as the thimble rigger politely shown that to us. Oops. Our first 200 were gone. I stepped down to wait until senior starts winning them back and then I'll join him and get my money back. And he kept giving out his 100 rubles bills guessing wrong thimbles all along. And the rigger saying sympathetically to him like, no luck again, bro. And bro pulled out his last 13 rubles, all he had left. Is that it? The rigger asked surprised. That's fucking it? Senior replied perplexed. You must be a student, said the rigger mockingly, he had just ripped us off 800 rubles. Onet heard of his year's salaries was gone. And the crowd got quickly dispersed. Now I understood that they, in anticipation of the suckers like us, they just gambled to each other so everybody could see how easy it was to make big money until we came along. A year later, working in the north, I told my parents about how I got suckered and lost my 100 rubles. And senior had never told anybody, neither his sisters nor his mother on anything like this. They never knew what he had done to his treasured savings. Well, at least he had taken his goodbye pictures of his cash so he never forgets them. Ruslan has always been like that, not recognizing his mistakes. The Gemini, here, Ruslan, Ivan, and Julia, are they all like that? I wonder. As far as I know, he had never made or saved any significant amount of money ever since. That was my O. Henry style story which I probably should have sold to the Soviet Georgia Films short movie studio when I had a chance. It used to be good with this kind of stories back then. 16 Talking to Ruslan. I'm sure many have faced a similar thing when someone tells something about somebody when the latter is not familiar with the former, he or she might often develop a one-sided, often exaggerated idea of the first one, the demonized or, conversely, sublimed. And when meeting with the one described before, he turns out to be not that terrible or nothing special either. Well, when I write about someone, it is possible that my heroes might look a bit concentrated too. In real life, they might be not that great and terrible. And yet my brother cousin is going to get what is coming to him. I am going to mop up the floor with you. So, hold on, my dear brother, I am going to be really mean on you. Back in 1998, right before this country's government payment default, I went to visit my parents after being to Cyprus with my daughter. I managed that for the first time in 5 years. In less than 2 weeks left I managed to see not even all my relatives, not to mention my friends. Only the closest ones. Of course, I wanted to see Ruslan and his younger brother. So, we finally got together. We barely had a shot or two as Ruslan started picking on me. All of the fucking blue, as if he had come especially for this, to pick a fight with me. He started with this, hey. You are a fucking translator now, you fucking too good now to mingle with guys like us? Aren't you? What the fuck? I was taken aback. I wasn't in the mood to have this out with anybody. Okay. I took a deep breath and, carefully watching my words, no way did I want any brawling with my cousin. I still regarded him as my friend. I asked him what he was holding his grudge against me for. He said he hadn't liked all these years the way I was carrying myself on even before I got married. I kept him ignoring. Well, I came back to senses and took the offensive. Let's remember what has started this my ignoring thing. Shall we? And I started. I started with how I came to my first holiday from the north in 1989 when I almost completely recovered from the injury that occurred to me a year before. I still had that disability status. I don't want to stay on this. I never played my accordion ever since because of that injury. First thing I did when I arrived, after I had spent my time with my parents, of course, I went to see him. I went to see him with yet another relative who also came from afar, and we all hadn't seen him for the last 15 years at least. And he, Ruslan, with his girlfriend who was hostile and mean to us, to put it mildly, quickly and quietly bailed out on us. That was fucking it. I came to say hello to my best friend whom I hadn't seen for 2 years. I don't mention the relative I came along with. And he fucking left us. We were shocked. That very night I went to have a serious talk with him. I wanted to know what the fuck was going on. He seemed to have little to say. He was silent and smoking. I saw he felt terrible and acted like a detainee in front of an officer, who certainly had something to say and yet he couldn't cough it up. And his wet hen in her nightgown jumped out into the yard we were in, and hobbled Ruslan back yelling at me, "Stop setting him against me." The 2 shocks in one day must have played tricks on me. I just silently swung to hit her, but Ruslan was faster than that and yanked her in. I saw he was both embarrassed and couldn't argue with her. Fucking jerk. They got married, despite the fact that all the relatives on both sides, rare unanimity, were against it. The following year they had a daughter with the Down syndrome. Up until 1993, the year I had gotten married myself, I was regularly visiting my parents. The plane tickets were cheap in the early 90s. I even was thinking to start working on rotation so I wouldn't have to pay for the tickets at all. Well, I got married. Ruslan and his wife now treated me exaggeratedly well, but this ship had sailed already. Since then I was never looking forward to seeing him, and whenever they showed up, especially with the kid of theirs, I was irritated. I still wouldn't mind though if he came to me alone, for a change. Why always bring his stupid wife along? I couldn't stand at all. If he ever came to visit me on his own, he would never do that for socializing. He would come to ask for money instead, and as soon as he got some money from me he would leave right then. Wouldn't stay with me a second longer for a decency's sake. I always gave him a reasonable amount of money. He never returned them. Once he came to me on the day I was going back to the north, for the money of course. He must have figured I still had some money on me, no getting away with that. Again, as soon he got them he walked. Did it ever occur to him that I was short of cash myself? I was supporting my parent and my younger brother? Would he ever appreciate the fact I still gave him some? Why wouldn't he stay a bit longer until I leave and say goodbye at least? Help me along with my luggage a little bit? What happened to my best friend? Why was he so obviously showing me what he really wanted from me, no more and no less than that? He had no work now, his wife had never ever worked, she probably was crazy. I mean, I would never recognize him. I would never fall as low as he has. You wouldn't believe, just 2 years before he was cherishing his work, his working life, he never ever been late to his work, let alone any absence without leave, some of our friends were well known for. And now look at him. Once we were having a beer with him, I put an empty bottle under the table by the kiosk. He took it and put it in his plastic bag. I looked at him with my jaw dropped. He mumbled something about some money still to be made on that. About 2 cents of a glass bottle. I remembered when I was helping him to move from one apartment to another, the landlord expelled him for non-payment. I noticed that among his belongings there were plastic bags with empty glass bottles I wanted him to forget about. I didn't want to carry them, but he stubbornly kept them. It was a bad time for all of us, but none I knew had stooped so low. They lived on their child's welfare. I even heard he went to his mom on her pension day and took all the money from her. Seemed to be true to me. I remember the way he treated her mom, our crazy Aunt Rhea. He was far from being noble. Did he remember, I wonder, his strong and inspirational speeches, when we both were romantic and young, on how he would never allow anyone to even think of hurting his mom, especially his future wife. He would disown her right there if she ever spoke to her with any trace of rudeness, and I always retorted to him to never say never, the life's a bitch to shoot from the hip. I, by the way, not being that black and white, still managed to have both my wife and my mother to treat each other and me with due respect. Yes, things could get easily out of control with my wife and mom, they always hated each other, but at least I would do something with, unlike Ruslan. In-laws do not always get along fine, as everybody would know that, and it's not easy to take sides between your mother and your wife. Ruslan on the other hand always took his wife's side whenever hell broke loose between her and poor Aunt Rhea. He thought everybody was against his wife. Sure, he was right, I wasn't overly looking to see him. Shall I continue? There was no stopping for me now. I also reminded him one, maybe a bit cheapish, thing which described him the best. Take fucking that. It wasn't me who started this. That was long before the army. We both went to schools. Him, his mom, sisters and his brother went to a local marketplace to buy him some nice winter jacket he always wanted. Back in Soviet time, the importance of buying something of this kind was a big thing, comparable to buying, if not a car, expensive furniture at least. A whole family would go for this kind of shopping. I went with them as well. And he gave me a bite I always remembered, but said nothing about it up until that conversation: just don't buy an ugly raincoat Radek has. Do you remember that, Ruslan? That raincoat was ugly all right, and I hated it for that. But that was the only one my parents could afford. And the people were tactful enough not to notice it. The people, but not him. And who would argue with that? Who would say it wasn't ugly? It was. I could say now in return what rags he was wearing on now, and he, unlike me, always been crazy about the clothes. But I wouldn't do that. I had mentioned though that I had those blue jeans, jackets, and jogging shoes on me delivered directly from the USA. He could see it himself, he couldn't take his eyes off them. Since then, I had good jobs, I had lost and found them again, I had entered and finished university, and I am doing not that bad at all. And Ruslan had managed to get out of his depressing poverty. His mother before dying managed to get a 4-room apartment from the city as a mother of 4, and Ruslan, while his younger brother was still in jail, and Ruslan had sold it out and bought a smaller apartment and some furniture. Now he had a roof over his head, he hadn't gotten rich, but he was doing fine beachcombing. For some reason, though, they never pay for the utilities, and, over time, they had accumulated unpaid bills of a quarter of their apartment cost, but they were not evicted. The law does not allow to repo an only apartment to pay the debt. What's fucking wrong with them? Now a bit on his working experience again. After graduating his vocational school, he worked as a mechanic and then as an excavator operator. After the army, to my surprise, he suddenly became ashamed of what he was doing for a living. He would never tell his girls what his profession was and avoided them on his tractor and with his work clothes on. And he would be distressed if that happened to him. But he always was in good standing at work though, and quit working when he started seeing this crazy girl. Because she didn't like the working stiff guys. She liked the rich tough guys instead. Apparently, she had stepped on his favorite toes. I also was operating an excavator converted to a pile driving unit. Understandably, I wasn't overly proud of it either. Neither was I ashamed of it. It didn't matter what were you doing for a living as long as the money was good. What most annoyed me in him was his hypocrisy manifestation. If he bought himself something really good as he thought, he would say something like, "What happened to you? Your mood is fading. Isn't it?" He would like to think I was jealous of that, and he would search my face expression for any traces of that. He liked to put me in no-win situations, and even if I kept silent he would still interpret it as a confutation to his assumptions. Okay, I had never denied to him that, like everybody else, I had my weaknesses. Nobody is perfect. Yes, I could get envious. What's wrong with that? But not for his camera, for crying out loud, he had just bought for his 2 month salaries. I had mine, not as good as his but still the nice Soviet kind of Leica replica, was good enough to take better pictures than he did with his fantastic camera. He never was able to beat me with my picture quality. He, on the other hand, if he envied something he would do it in some biological level, he would get pale, he would suffer enormously. And he would get deeply offended if he got himself caught in this, and he would claim up his own ass, believing himself in that, of course, that he wasn't that kind of a guy. He would never envy anybody on something. He was above that. Like whenever I was happy he was happy too. Period. Okay. Since then whenever I enjoyed something really big for me I would always give him a call to let him know, make him happy. It wasn't nice of me, I know, but when I bought my first expensive car the first thing I did I called him with this really great news. He didn't say a fucking word to that. He couldn't bring himself to it. It was beyond his ability to overcome his true himself. I know I am not much better than he is. But I am capable of finding the strength to write about it that makes me at least not worse than him. I am telling this not behind his back, he knows that. I never revealed his real name here, someday he may read this chapter and recognize himself. Well, I was being myself. I read this chapter over again and I was horrified. I must have been emotional and left nothing good of him. Maybe I leave it as is. I just wanted to complete his picture. 17 My little sis, I wrote to you about my father, an A student at school and a very smart person. I have mentioned my nephew, who is also an A student and intelligent as well, just the way my father was. But, it is rather an exception in our family. Basically, there are a lot of creativity persons among us in our family, but with some sort of stupidity strain that runs across our clan, to be honest. My sister wasn't any special at all with that, neither in childhood nor when she grew up. With age, I had the impression that she had become even dumber. It was becoming too conspicuous to me. In addition to this, some sort other oddities began to add up. Do not forget that in our family we had a considerable percentage of crazy people already. Remember my Aunt Raya, my younger cousin Radik, another 2 cousins, who are a brother and a sister to each other, living in Kazakhstan. Those are the ones that I immediately remembered. Her simplicity, that is worse than robbery, often had the worst consequences for me, sometimes for years. When she came to the north, she, by her stupidity, had me quarreled with all my relatives. No, she never had plotted against me, she was probably just trying to be good for all. She is a year younger than me and, as it often happens in a family, I often had fights with her, and, being older and stronger, I always got spanked by my parents, often for the cause, I must admit, but my sister used these situations very skillfully. But outside the house though, I fiercely protected her so nobody would even think of hurting her at school, and she automatically had as high a status as I had it for myself in the street, but back at home, I started to hate her again. And so it went until she left to study for Leningrad. Since then, we only saw each other during the holidays, when she came to us, and we got along very well. She didn't stay long enough to annoy each other. Until I got married, I helped her financially as well. In general, I acted as an elder good brother should. What was more amazing that all her friends were even more stupid than herself. Do you remember her friend Ida? What about her other ex-friend, Ruslan's wife? Others were the same. None were smart or pretty. Because of her ill-considered actions, I had not spoken to her for many years. Twice at least. She and her husband with a little daughter of theirs went to live in Belgium. There she gave birth to a son and divorced her husband. Without her husband, it was hard for her to keep up, but she raised children there. In Belgium, she had through a surgery, a tumor was removed from her head. My sister speaks 2 languages, Russian and French. Both poorly. She absolutely forgot her native Tatar language. I remember when we were in kindergarten, we both did not speak Russian. When nobody else was around in the kindergarten, she would use an opportunity to talk to me in only language she knew, but I, being so shy of Tatar tongue, angrily would dismiss her. She was supposed to speak Russian only there, that was my rule. We had to learn fast. She must have been overstressed. Apparently, it has hurt her for a lifetime. Her native language was mercilessly driven deep into the back of her mind. She did not master the Russian language perfectly. She knows French even worse. Her children probably were embarrassed by her in Belgium, just as we were all embarrassed by our Aunt Raya, who spoke little Russian. Over time, it became alarming to me to see that she started remembering our dialogues with her, which had never taken place. The more she remembered them, the more I became angry with her. She concluded that I had forgotten everything that allegedly took place from the time of our family move from the village to the city. I was tired of proving to her that a lot of what she said had never happened. I wrote here that I always had a feeling in my childhood and youth that no one loved me. She had a similar problem, only she had expressed it differently, more pathologically, if you will. It now seemed to her that everyone chased and loved her, only she was a naive silly girl and turned her nose up at them. And she constantly brought up dialogues we allegedly discussed her suitors. I told her that I had never discussed her boyfriends with her, and I did not know whom she was dating with. She is now looking for many of them and cannot find those with whom she allegedly dated. Who knows, she might have never seen these guys at all. I should feel sorry for her, I know, but she only has been irritating me so far, and I asked her to stop communicating with me for the time being. Let's take some time out. She agreed. Moreover, it seemed to me that she becomes jealous of the fact that I have a woman I love. I did not give my sister's name here. Probably it would better for you not to know her name at all.